It's time, folks! Today we begin an exploration on some of the beautiful sounds of one of our favorite musical instrument to be used for soundtrack. Yes, we're starting an exploration of trumpets in gaming. Welcome to the Music Arcade.
That's even better than I expected.
That was so good. I was trying very hard not to corpse on that one.
Don't underestimate my Doot.
I'm so
never
glad I
again.
left myself out of the intro because I was laughing my ass off.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Music Arcade. I'm Galen, the Sound Guy Firestone.
I'm Rana Kill the Doot guy.
And I'm Eddie, and I would be playing the John Cena theme, but it's copyrighted.
Oh, God. Okay, well, we're talking about something else as well. You mentioned the Doot guy, and all I can think of is Dude guy, which is my...
It sounded like that when I say it.
Yeah, which is my nickname for Robert Knox's personal guard in the Miami map of Hitman World of Assassination, formerly known as Hitman 2. So this is episode 48. You may notice episode 47, we didn't have a Hitman special. The short version is we kind of just didn't have much to say on it. We've talked about nearly everything in that franchise we kind of could have already.
And then when we searched for a theme, we went for music genres and kind of drew a blank, which is when we ended up with a combination of suggestions that led to this episode being the first instance of the Wheel of Instruments.
Yeah, so we all had some ideas about what instrument to do a thing on, and I just said, you know what, let's just let RNG decide. So we put, I think it was 12 different instruments into the Wheel of Names. I hit the button and it came up trumpets. So we're talking trumpets today. And when this topic came up, I thought I would have, 3 ready choices, and I'm like, let's go with these 3. Out of those 3, one of them made it into the episode. One of them I discovered I hated, and I'm just like, this song's terrible, and I just do not want to talk about this. The other one, I misremembered the song, which is weird. There were plenty of trumpets in the intro, and then never again. And I'm just like, well, that's underwhelming. So I actually had to scramble for some picks. And then, my playlist decided to troll me by giving me a great song with a lot of trumpets in it from Yakuza. And I'm just like, thanks, playlist, this is helpful. Not only have we talked about this song to death already, but we're trying not to talk too much about Yakuza on this podcast because of Year of the Dragon.
Yes. And then, on my end, I had the opposite problem in that I had... Basically, I thought I would have, 3 comfortable picks, maybe a little bit extra. Mm-hmm. And then I went through my big bucket of songs I like, some of them sending me towards thinking and reminding myself of other songs or other games, and then I ended up with 15 picks before cuts. I had to cut out Snake Eater and my favorite track from Brave Exvius and Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire. You know, the game that had officially in its rating too much water and trumpets. Half of which is our theme.
Yeah, I do want to shout out how we have a trumpet theme, and yet we missed Pokemon Generation 3 and the entirety of the mariachi genre.
Yeah.
Well, admittedly, for my reasoning,
sacrifices had to be made.
I don't really play Pokemon, and I don't really listen to mariachi, so it's not really surprising that I missed those. Yeah. Our, resident South American, however, how did you miss Latin instrumentation?
Good question.
Hey, look, it was weird in the pre-selection. I was the one that brought also an Arknight's pick before it got the cut as well.
You brought an Arknight's pick.
How did you miss the Arknight's pick, Galen?
The top of this trailer, it has a lot of good trumpets.
Well, actually, I explained that. The song that it turns out I hated was a character theme from Arknights for a character that is now heavily associated with trumpets. It's just that song's terrible. So I'm just like, I'm cutting this and moving on with life. So I didn't miss it, I just miscalculated.
Yeah.
Okay, fair. But yeah, I kind of was right in between you two because I went, okay, I have exactly 3 picks I want to talk about. And then
we should probably talk about one of those.
I went, wait, I have a 4th pick. I'll just cheat again and add a 4th pick.
Yeah, well, let's start talking about those picks then. I believe you're actually up first.
Indeed.
That is correct. Because Donkey Kong Country 2 was another of those games with quite a lot of trumpets, actually.
Yeah, and, that was a very... Well, we will be talking about that again later. One of my picks is that, but the SNES era had some very interesting trumpet sound effects. The sampling was very odd back in those days. I mean, it had to be, just given the circumstances.
Yeah. I think they did a decent job with the Donkey Kong Country series.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, it sounds pretty cool. And the song in question this time, we were kind of spoiled for choice when it comes to Donkey Kong Country 2. But the one picked was Bossanova, which is not Bossanova, but that's beside the point. Which kind of somehow makes trumpets, chimes, and harps sound a little bit menacing.
Yeah, I think part of it is that they went with the whole... I mean, you start on that pirate ship, so it feels like a kind of sinister pirate anthem, in a way.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a game with a lot of trumpets and accordions because of the pirate theme. At least in the first half.
You're sailing the high seas, you'll want some dudes with you.
And it fits very well.
Yeah. I don't know, I'm not the biggest fan of this song. It definitely, to me, it doesn't sound like David Wise's work, but it is, at least, I don't know, it's hard for me to put my finger on it. It's certainly competent. I'm not going to say that it's poorly composed or anything. I will have a similar comment about a later song, which I think is actually, like, not very good. I don't know, it's hard for me to put my finger on this one. The trumpets do feel fairly mild, like, they really only appear in the one section.
Yeah, there's a callback every now and then, but mostly... I mean, given the samplings, there are some things that are surprisingly similar, even though the original instruments aren't, but overall in the composition, I think the main thing that comes back to me is, again, that marine sub-theme with the way it kind of waving around in its pace, in its intensity.
It also kind of fits with the way the boss themes work in the game, because most bosses, at least that I can remember in DKC2, they tend to do this thing where they would go from left to right and back to left in the screen. So it kind of fits that idea. Also, this ocean vibe you mentioned of kind of goes and comes like the waves.
Yeah, it sets a pace. And the trumpet is kind of the apex of that pace. Like it rises west, it goes down again. Yes, I will be doing a lot more trumpet sounds in this episode. Thank you for asking.
I would expect nothing less.
Excellent.
If anything, I'm surprised at your restraint for taking so long to do that one.
You mean to doot that one?
That isn't what I meant to say, but I'll take it. I guess my accent was just taking the reins on that one.
I'm clearly in a mood if I'm the one making these sorts of jokes. What the hell's happening right now?
I think this is the point where we are moving on towards some interesting remixes of FF6.
Yeah, so let me just go ahead and shout out OC Remix real quick. Again, like usual, love their work, always love their work.
Also had one of their tracks in the cutting floor.
Yeah. So this one was kind of a brain tangent. Not much of one, but it was a brain tangent. At first, I'm thinking I should probably just do FF6's battle theme, because that's like one of the most famous trumpet lines in history. Yeah, exactly. And then I kind of stopped myself and went, that's a little too easy. So I checked the OC remix of that song from this album, Balance and Ruin. It was a song somewhat funnily called Polemos, given that we are weirdly like Mick Gordon adjacent at a couple of points this episode.
Yeah.
But that one was just a straight heavy metal track. There was no trumpets in that one at all. It was just replaced with electric guitar. I think the song works, but not really for this purpose.
As a lot of early OC remix did.
Yeah, although this particular album is extremely varied. This particular song, however, which I don't exactly remember how, I think I was just listening to the album last night when I picked this one. But it struck me because it also starts very heavy metal, but unlike Polemos, which is the battle theme remix, this one, Camp Kefka, actually keeps the horn section for the military march sequence while still playing heavy metal. It creates a very interesting dichotomy that I really kind of appreciate in a weird way. It's deeply unusual mixing, deeply unusual orchestration, but I really dig it.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Command & Conquer Red Alert franchise.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Military vibe, but also kind of a majestic thing going on.
Yeah.
And my best description of it, which I actually wrote down in my notes, is that this feels like a heroic theme, but for a villain.
That's a pretty accurate way of putting it.
Because the trumpets, and I think this is something we'll hear more throughout this episode. Trumpets kind of tend to bring this regal or heroic vibe to music. And they do that here as well, but the guitars and the stronger bass kind of give a bit more of a menacing vibe. So it's heroic, but for a villain.
I think part of the equation here as well is that it kind of mixes two aspects. The heroic epic entry aspect, which is found in a lot of like fantasy battle tracks and so on, but also a more modern military march aspect.
Yeah.
And which makes sense for a techno-fantasy game. So it's at a very nice crossroads, and very demonstrative of what trumpets can do as part of a game music. Even in a remix, that is.
I think it's a very interesting choice of instrumentation, but it's a very good choice of instrumentation.
Yeah, it works. I'm not necessarily sure it should work, but it works.
Yeah, and I mean, when has a villain ever matched with the sound of a lot of brass in any noteworthy franchise? No, excuse me while I think of Darth Vader a little bit more.
I mean,
I even need to think about him because I have an action figure of him in front of my monitor.
That's very fair. Both of those are very fair points. Wow, you caught me a little off guard with that one. This doesn't sound anything like the Imperial March, so I'm not really sure how to respond.
Yeah, no, this specific track doesn't. But I just associated a different kind of villain and military march. The strangest thing is that I thought of Star Wars and the Star Wars games and game soundtrack which would feature brass because of the most circuitous possible way, which was that I thought of Soul Calibur 4, in which there was Darth Vader, Yoda, and the apprentice from The Force Unleashed as guest characters in it.
Right.
You have no idea how hard I had to hold myself back to not cheat by bringing the Imperial March and claim it came from a video game.
I would have yelled at you.
Star Wars video games.
I would have yelled at you. I would have yelled
I know you would.
Yeah. I make it a point not to veto songs, but that's a little too out there. That's a little too, like, nah, dude.
Oh yeah. If I did that, it would have been for the joke.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to Camp Kafka, I think the main association that comes to my mind when we're talking about the trumpet use here is more the kind of the trope, maybe cliche at this point, of having medieval settings where the king's arrival is announced by a lot of trumpets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's kind of the vibe I get. Sort of like it's the military march or maybe the theme for his army, and then Kefka is announced and is arriving. That's sort of the image that comes to my mind.
Pomp, if you will.
Yeah. Which fits for the character. Even I, having not played Final Fantasy VI beyond a few minutes, I know who Kefka is, and that's a very fitting take on a theme for him.
Except it's not his theme. It's the theme for the Imperial military in general. His theme is very different.
Oh yeah, I am aware of his theme. I've heard it before.
Yeah,
But by association, I mean, it's still sort of associated with him in a way.
And the track is named Camp Kefka.
yes. One of his earliest appearances in the story was at this camp where this song plays before his theme takes over and everything goes straight to hell.
Yep.
Sounds like a Final Fantasy villain, all right.
Well, we talked villains. Let's talk heroes now. How about one of my favorite heroes of all time? Eddie, take it away.
Yeah, so I actually came to this is the fourth song I mentioned in the intro before we move on, where I went at the last minute. Wait, I know a fourth one. And this came to mind precisely because of the trumpets on Camp Kafka. Because they gave that heroic, sort of majestic vibe. And I was instantly reminded of the similar heroic and majestic vibe of the trumpet usage in Theme of Samus Aran, which I think was introduced in Super Metroid, but has now since been used in pretty much
everything,
Metroid game. In particularly, this version we're talking about is actually a medley of like 5 themes from Super Metroid. It comes from an album called Game Music Concert 4 by Symphony Orchestra Live Best Collection. It's a Japanese album from the 90s.
Right.
And I also need to give a shout out here. Galen shouted out OC Remix. I need to shout out VGMDP because it's very hard to find detailed info on Japanese only albums, especially ones from the 90s. This one is from 94. And yet they have the full credits. It's amazing. Thumbs up.
The VGMDB is a treasure trove.
Oh yeah. For
It's
anyone who
such a good
reads
resource.
anyone who stops to read the detailed show notes for every episode of ours, you'll note that we tend to at least try our best at properly crediting the composers and arrangers.
Yeah.
That all comes from VGMDB. But yeah, going back to the actual music, this is pretty much, in a way, the opposite of Camp Kafka, in that Camp Kafka was a hero's theme for a villain. This is a hero's theme for an actual hero. It does still have those sort of ominous, menacing vibes in the back, but they feel less like the menace is coming from the character whose theme it is, and more from the environment that this character is having to fight through, if that makes any sense. But yeah, it's iconic for a reason.
Yeah.
I think what struck me when I compared to some part of my research is that maybe it's due to Samus's aesthetic and the sci-fi setting as a whole, but I think that something in the instrumentation and in the tone used kind of felt like it was descended from the Japanese science fiction, Japanese like your space battleship Yamatos and your even early giant mechs, like your anything that ends in Zinger, basically.
Yeah, I was about to say,
those-
whatever they cannibalized to make Robotech with, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those sort of anime and series had very much a similar tone of soundtrack, and given that it has this big metallic hero vibe to them, the family tree makes sense to me.
Do you want to hear something funny?
Sure.
So
No, I hate fun, but go ahead.
Yeah, of course you do. This album, according to the credits on VGMDB, each song in the album, it's 11 tracks, was arranged by a different person. Only 2 tracks share the same arranger.
Right.
And the arranger for this particular medley, the Super Metroid medley, is a guy who's worked on a lot of anime and a lot of live action in Japan. And here's some of the franchises. Kamen Rider, Mobile Suit Gundam, and Ultraman.
Those are names even I know.
will take no further question.
Yep.
I will retire champion.
Yeah, he was also the composer for The Big O, which was an anime all about a big mecha as well.
One of those few that I've actually watched, yeah. Because I remember back in those days, Cartoon Network actually funded a season of it.
Yeah,
which was just a wild cross-cultural exchange.
Yeah, just for full transparency, the person in question would be Toshihiko Sahashi, according to VGMDB. So yeah, you're not
the vibes don't lie.
Exactly, you're not far. I think a final thing that is worth pointing at this one is, isn't orchestral covers fun? Aren't they good?
You're talking to a guy who sees concerts of them a few times a year. Yes, they're good.
Foreshadowing. Sorry, I had something on my throat.
Foreshadowing happens to the best of us. Hope you get better soon.
Damn it.
And on the subject of foreshadow, we actually foreshadowed Soul Calibur here somewhat accidentally, so let's talk about Soul Calibur. How about that for a plan?
Yeah, and I didn't even think about my favorite fighting game franchise first. I was checking on my big bucket of songs and was enjoying an Ace Combat track, and I was like, wait, Junichi Nakatsuru, I know that name. What else did he do? Oh, right, he basically only does 2 things, Ace Combat and Soul Calibur.
That's a hell of a resume.
There we go, then. Yeah. And so I went with my heart and went with probably one of the most iconic, most breathy themes in the series, which is Confrontation.
Yeah. Even I remember this one.
Yeah, it's very front and center, and we talked about heroic arrivals, and that is very much that, especially the beginning.
Right.
That is a royal announcement, or something more like maybe the start of a fight in an arena.
Well, that other one seems accurate.
Yeah. That was kind of my point, really.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair.
But yeah, but even beyond the hook, it keeps bouncing from calmer moments, some ebb and flow, but with some steady pace, and that brass just, and those trumpets in particular, just keep having this heroic feeling, this kind of... I don't want to say big fight, because that's kind of got that boxing match connotation, but the medieval equivalent of that.
Right.
I kind of think of, again, a trope that comes to mind. I kind of think of the usual depictions in media of Roman Colosseums.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of arena fighters, of which this kind of medieval fighting game idea is more or less in direct descent.
Right.
So yeah, it just works really well and has that presence, and most of all, I think it's just like you've mentioned, Galen, even though you're not much of a Soul Calibur player, that track sticks in your mind.
I mean, I'm not one now, but I was when I was younger. I definitely had my share of specifically Soul Calibur 1 on the Dreamcast. That was like my go-to. I know everyone talks about 2, but 2's when I started falling off of the series, and fighting games in general is when I'm starting to get in that age.
Yeah, I only played the first Soul Calibur on arcade, of all things. There was a machine in a corner of my local cinema's arcade.
Oh, nice.
Not for long, but I've enjoyed a couple of runs. And yeah, I will never not love Soul Calibur unless they manage to completely work relentlessly to ruin everything. But they have a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
and
that
even
seems...
then, they will keep the legacy of songs like that.
Yeah, I was about to say, that seems a little unlikely that they would thrash themselves that hard, despite what certain naysayers on the internet might say.
Yeah, and there definitely has been some stumbles along the way.
Oh, sure.
That, I mean, how many times can Tekken completely siphon the funds of that game? Moving on, no transition, just moving on to the next track. I've said my piece.
Okay.
That's it.
Boy.
Yes, I'm still
yeah.
salty for something that happened 10 years ago. So, you were saying?
The Mega Man?
Mega Man.
Mega Man.
Speaking of being salty about something from years ago, Mega Man X6.
Yeah.
Oof.
Actually, I transitioned way better than I thought I would.
Yeah. I just gotta say, I thought 6 was better than 5. I mean, 5 was... I mean, it was still a very broken game, but 6 was way better than 5. It was just more complete. Which I know is saying, like, blasphemy compared to what most people think, but I stand by that statement.
I think X6... I do have a soft spot for the gameplay because it was the first PlayStation X game that I played.
Right.
But as a game, it's obviously one of the weaker entries in the Mega Man franchise on a whole.
Right.
But what I think is notable is how they developed X6 in like 6 months or something, and it has one of the best soundtracks in the franchise for me.
It has a great soundtrack.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier. I kind of didn't expect us to go into the tokusatsu genre with the mechas and the Super Sentai franchise.
Right.
But this song for the Infinity Mijinion stage, the early trumpets, not only are they very catchy, but they give me strong "Here Comes the Megazord" vibes.
Okay,
maybe because
that's
that's exactly what happens in the game.
They gave me Final Countdown vibes. But maybe that's just the type of trumpet they use. That me that.
There are actually fan remixes that mix the two.
I'm not very surprised by that.
Yeah, I had to dredge through those when I was looking for this track because there are so many of them on YouTube.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to the mecha thing, it literally the whole stage here, you're basically going in circles in a tower, and there's a huge mecha in the background constantly aiming at you. And the mecha is introduced during that intro with the trumpets. So, like, it's 100% tokusatsu.
So
yeah, and they really use it to mark the moment.
Yeah.
Because aside from the initial trumpet-heavy Europe-esque hook, the trumpet doesn't really come back in the rest of the track.
Yeah,
No.
I was kind of debating removing this pick from my list precisely because of that. But that hook at the start is just, it's way too catchy for me to ignore.
it's really catchy. I'm actually not as familiar with the original version of this song as I am the, hey, we're talking about them again, OC Remix. Did an album called Maverick Hunter X that was really good and included this song. I've thrown you guys some tracks from that remix album before, I think. I know at the very least 10 Minutes of Frost, or whatever it was called, was in there. 10 Minutes of Hypothermia, I think it is, was in there at some point.
Yeah, and one of the track I cut was precisely because there was already an OC remix track and a Mega Man track, but I immediately thought of a Mega Man X OC remix track with a lot of trumpets. So
Well, there we have it.
I guess trumpets and robots have more of an association than we initially thought.
That's a very interesting combination of factors here that I'm actually kind of trying to wrap my head around, but yeah, it does actually seem that way.
You will be Doot. Do not resist. Doot.
Oh, God.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, this episode is insane. I love it.
I wonder if that sort of unexpected association, let's say, doesn't come as sort of a side effect of trumpets being associated with something majestic, and to us,
like I
robots
said,
are sort of a majestic, sci-fi-esque creation still.
Yeah,
Right.
like I said, the descendancy of the use of that instrument in previous anime and series, and we are talking for a lot of games concerned about Japanese composers, so they would have that association. It all checks out.
It turns out things are more complex than we initially might think.
Are we even remotely surprised by this?
Nope.
That means we're learning with our viewers.
That's fair.
With that, let's move on to something perhaps a little bit less mechanical.
Unless you count the combat in that game, that was very stiff and robotic, but that's a whole other conversation. Anyway, Lufia, Curse of the Sinistrals. Now, I've talked about this soundtrack before, because it was basically an internal remix. Curse of the Sinistrals is an action game remake of Lufia 2 Rise of the Sinistrals, which is, I believe, chronologically the first game in the franchise. I say I believe that to be the case, but who knows? They could have released other weirdo games, but I wasn't paying attention.
I have played a Lufia game to completion, and I am never sure which one it is.
Awesome.
That's fair.
Anyway, so this is kind of a note-for-note remix album of the original game. Like, they were just like, the soundtrack is too good, we're not even going to bother messing with it. We're going to use the same MIDIs and just reorchestrate it, which appears to be what they did. And this song in particular got a big glow up when it comes to its trumpet lead compared to its SNES version.
It's got that epic flair right down to pat.
It does. So this song is one that I'm actually kind of surprised I haven't brought up before. So once upon a time, I actually worked on a fan game of just various crossover franchises, some stupid RPG Maker thing.
Ooh.
And this was the song that was picked before I even got there as the regular boss theme. Now, I did expand the soundtrack because I'm still me, but this one stayed despite everything because, one, I did play Lufia 2 a lot as a kid, and two, it sounds really good.
It's a really fun track, really energetic.
It is. It's got a great energy to it, but yeah, that trumpet lead is actually very unusual for both the style, and that's something that's been pretty consistent with my picks this week, is that the trumpet hasn't really been on the nose. It's all been, not really where you expect it.
Yeah, which is, I think, very interesting because as a sound, we're joking about the Doots, but it's a very loud sound that can be very overpowering if you don't handle it correctly.
Oh, absolutely. Horns they will blast you out if you're not careful. It's one of the reasons why the horn section in a symphony orchestra is so much smaller than a woodwind section or a string section.
Honestly, I think that's probably where the memes even come from, because so many people just don't use the sound properly.
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
no.
The first thing I thought wasn't even Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire itself. It was the meme of it with the deformed image of the guy holding a trumpet blowing in the ears of somebody running away.
Yeah. That's
Haven't played Gen 3, that's fair.
I have not, but this sounds amazing. Yeah, it's very impressive what the song does with the trumpet, because as you said, it's very easy to overpower, and using a trumpet as a lead line for a song this textured is dangerous because it can blast you out really hard, as we just explained. But in this particular case,
it could have been a mess.
It could have been, but it definitely was not. It comes together so cleanly.
Yeah.
There's probably an alternate universe where they inadvertently turned this theme into a mariachi song, a bad mariachi song. But this is really just somehow the elements here fit really, really well with one another.
Yeah. Yeah, this is kind of one of my OG favorites for a reason. It's kind of a shame. Lufia 2 is one of those SNES classics that I would put in the same category as games you should play, like Seventh Saga or Paladin's Quest, but it's somewhat more famous than those.
Yeah.
I would probably put it in the same category as Illusion of Gaia, as a game people have heard of and maybe are passingly familiar with, but haven't played nearly as much as some of the all-time classics. And if anything, I could kind of point someone in that direction. It's hey, maybe give Lufia 2 a shot if you like that classic SNES or RPG.
Yeah, no, I think Lufia and the Quintet trilogy are very much on the same level of a good SNES game. You kinda owe it to yourself to play one of those days.
Yeah. Yeah. I would not say the same for the remake. I didn't dislike the remake. I think it's pretty good, but it is not a classic. Not the way the original was. Also, they changed the ending, which just made me salty.
Also, remind me, in the original, is that the one that also has a roguelite side game?
I don't know if the first one did, but the second one did.
I see.
The second one had I think it was called the Ancient Cave.
Yeah, and as far as good design goes...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was an OG roguelite in a Super Nintendo game, an actual Super Nintendo game.
Impressive stuff, really.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about ahead of the curve.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if you'll excuse me a brief aside,
okay.
I have a correction to bring. The trumpet meme I was referring to wasn't with originally the themes from Pokémon. It was with Gourmet Race from Kirby 64.
Oh, fair enough. I'm not familiar with that game, so this time I have no witty comment to give you.
So, we've talked about RPGs a lot. We've talked about action games. This last one I have to assume is a rhythm game by the name, and Ren is our resident rhythm game expert, so what am I missing, if anything?
You are correct.
Yay!
I mean, the fact it's named Rhythm Thief is a little bit of a hint. But
it's a hint, but that could mean anything, let's just be honest.
A correct pick is a correct pick. I mean, it's got a violin in the cover, and you hear the track, which is the main theme of the game, and it's harpsichord, weirdly enough, and trumpets. And a lot of bass bass strings as well.
So,
But yeah, overall a very jazzy ensemble.
right, you're not wrong.
With a harpsichord.
You're not wrong here. It is like a harpsichord, but it's a synth harpsichord that is a very kind of distinct sound that's very acid jazz.
Yeah. Which, I mean, jazzy is the name of the game there.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've mentioned before in our stealth episode that jazzy and stealth go hand in hand, so you have a music-centric game with some thievery going on. It's a match made in heaven. And the track is definitely a pretty good one as far as I'm concerned. It's very rhythmical, it kind of eggs you on. I do have some problems with it as far as its usage in the game, because, while this track in itself is nice, it cannot carry a game on its own, and yet it tries, because for a rhythm game, they sure use a lot of remixes of that one track all of the times. I was sick of it by the time I was halfway through the game, and that was on top of this game being literally too French for me in its setting.
So it's too French for you,
Wow.
and it's a rhythm game that doesn't actually do rhythm right. I'm getting the impression this game isn't actually that good.
No, it isn't.
I'm
It's
getting
cute, however,
Yeah,
but
the impression I got was slightly different. It was more that they know you and they developed this to annoy you in particular.
yeah, it's basically a demonstration of how much too much of a good thing can feel.
At least the art style looks cool, and
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
no,
I wouldn't
It's
have
very
gotten
cute.
I wouldn't have gotten any of that from just hearing this song. I actually really like this track, but I do
Yeah,
get how
it's
it get
good, it's
tiring
good.
after a while.
Yeah, because we've mentioned that trumpets can be overpowering, and this one again is used pretty well in the song. It doesn't tire you after 3 minutes. It does after 30, though.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, a rhythm game without variety in the soundtrack is a bad sign.
It's a very bad
Yes,
sign.
yes.
Like, even I know
get
that.
I guess they realized they had a good composition and just decided to use it to hell and back.
Yeah, and the levels itself do have a bit of variety, but for every story beat, every cutscene, every occasion, it's either that or a slightly different take on that, and I kinda had to rediscover my appreciation for this track by essentially ignoring the existence of all the other variation. I haven't listened to them. I haven't listened to any other track of the soundtrack just to be able to enjoy this one again.
Oof.
That is a terrifying sign. Wow. That just shows
Yes,
the
it
difference in context here, because from an outsider perspective, I'm like, yeah, this song is good, and Ren is like, this song is
Yeah.
PTSD-inducing.
It's not directly that,
No,
but
I'm
it's
more-
close enough.
Yeah, I'm here thinking this song is nice. I like more of this, and Rana's going no.
Right?
You do not. Be careful, for the monkey paw is going to curl on the valve of the trumpet.
Wow.
At least they got one good song out of it, I suppose.
Oh yeah, no, I'm glad the game exists because it gave us this song.
You know what? If nothing else, that's a take I can get behind.
Yeah, that's
Now then,
fair.
how about we move out from one fantasy to the next?
Ha. Okay, so I'm going to head this off at the pass. I did not pick this song because of the name.
Yes,
So this
Gailini
is...
Mayan.
Yes. Not to mention, this isn't even the This isn't even the first non-me Galen that we've mentioned, given that Starkiller's real name is Galen Merrick.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Uh-huh. My name is weirdly common in the weirdest places.
Yeah.
Also, once upon a time,
I
Captain
actually-
Picard took my name as an alias, so there's that too. So I
So
got it
you're
from
in
both Star Trek
Wars
and Star
Star
Wars.
Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know you had Locutus as your middle name.
Anyway, I picked the Galetta Gearmine from Phantasy Star Online. No, Phantasy Star Universe.
No, Universe.
Yeah, this is PSU, not
My
PSO.
bad. Then I laid in the production order.
You did, and that
Proceed.
threw me off. I'm like, wait a minute, no, this isn't PSO. I remember PSO soundtrack pretty well. This stage wasn't in it. You did not go to Moatube in PSO.
Yeah, and that's the only game in the series that I played, so even weirder. The GameCube version of all things.
Oh, I played the GameCube version of PSO as well, way back in the day.
Excellent. But without the one pad.
Anyway, the Galetta Gearmine from Moatube in Phantasy Star Universe. Phantasy Star Universe was the latest in a long line of robot riflemen. That's been my go-to in the Phantasy Star series. I believe that was a raw cast in Phantasy Star Online, and it just sort of kept with that
sounds
build.
right.
Yeah.
Ranger and Cat.
Yep.
Yeah.
Robot rifleman. Anyway, this song is wild because it is extremely horn-centric despite being a rock song.
Wild is very much the vibe it carries too. Like, it's got
Yeah.
a mystical feel to it.
I'm not sure about mystical.
Really
You're
like
mostly just beating up like rock monsters, but like you wouldn't expect a rock song outside of ska and punk to have this much horns in it just in general. It's just totally off genre. But that's been kind of my recurring theme for my picks so far, is that these songs have not really been songs where horn is usually used or accepted, and yet here we are, horn deep. This song is admittedly mostly sax, but the like pre-chorus and chorus really have just a ton of trumpet in there, so I felt like it counted. As opposed to one of the songs I cut, which was from Dynasty Warriors 6, I think, where the intro had a lot of horn, but then it just went to then it just went to electric guitar for the whole rest of the song, and I'm just like, well, this defeats the purpose fast.
Your song for you.
It is, but I kind of thought there'd be more horn in it, just because that was one of the more experimental songs on the soundtrack, but didn't play out that way.
Yeah. This one, though, it stays along pretty well.
It stays along pretty there, and it sticks in your brain.
I really like this song. Yeah, like you say, it sticks. It sounds like the kind of song you can spend hours farming with that in the background.
Yeah. Phantasy Star Universe is one of those games that I kind of wish I had an excuse to bring up more, because it has a really stellar soundtrack, and I never get a chance to talk about it.
Stellar.
How are you the one with the puns today?
That was not on purpose! Alright, well, that just took the wind out of my sails, huh?
I haven't even given my opinion of the song, and I don't know how to introduce it.
Like that. Talk song. Go.
Yeah.
Yes.
The song, I'd say it's not quite for me, but it's still very pleasant. It's one of those where I wouldn't ignore it if it started playing at random, so to speak, but I wouldn't go out of my way for it. I don't know what in this song makes it not for me, so to speak.
Interesting.
You're a very atmospheric guy. This song is pretty raucous.
I mean, I like heavy metal. Not like
Never
I
mind. You're
only
right.
listen
I
to
forgot how we met
atmospheric
for a
stuff.
second.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's just the wild mix of different genres, so to speak, because it is sort of a rock song at its core, but it has the trumpet, as you mentioned, despite not being ska or punk. It also has an electronic element.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe that mix is a bit too wild for me or something.
Fair.
All I can say is there's a bit around, I think, 130 in the track that for some reason reminds me of the trumpets in I think it's a dance song called Calibur. I don't know why that song came to my mind. But yeah, it's pleasant. It's not something I would just turn off. But I wouldn't go out of my way for it.
I will say this much: I do hope we get another Phantasy Star game of this quality in the future, because for everything I've heard about PSO2, it's a disaster.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
And on the subject of wanting...
But as a last note on the music itself, I think one of the things the trumpet probably helped conveying is that this is not a mine you're exploiting actively. It's one that you're exploring. It's clearly got that adventure thing.
Yeah, it's infested with monsters. Go clear them out.
Yeah, it's
You're
that kind of
spelunk-
tone and not something more industrious, which would be the other kind of mine theme.
Yeah, you're not mining, you're spelunking.
Exactly.
Very much so. And on the subject of games we wish would have new good entries, how about Age of Mythology?
It could happen.
It is
They brought
getting...
Age of Empire 4, and it's a really good version they brought back.
That's awesome.
They
I'd
are
love to hear
gonna
that.
make they're gonna do a re-release called Age of Mythology Retold, which is supposed to be on the same level of the Age of Empires definitive editions.
Neat.
We're still waiting because all we got was just a cinematic trailer announcing the title, and that was, I think, a couple years ago at this point.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I've been playing Age of Mythology on and off again for almost 2 decades now, and I have no idea where the song plays. It's called Gary's Reserve.
Apparently, it is the credit song for the expansion Atlantean campaign.
Which is weird because this is on the album for the base game.
I see.
Double, huh?
But one thing was sure, whatever it was, it certainly was not what I was expecting when I saw you brought an Age of Mythology track.
Yeah, this is... remove every preconception you might have of what the Age of Mythology soundtrack should sound like, because this does not sound like that.
This
in
song
any
has
way.
a groove.
It does.
Yeah.
I kind of get the vibe that this made... I might be making too many assumptions here, but maybe this might have influenced Darren Korb from Supergiant Games a bit, because it does that mixing of genres that he does sometimes.
Yeah.
And the synth here is pretty much the exact same as the one he uses a lot in Hades. So I could be reading too much into it, but it really reminded me of his work. I would say that maybe Darren Korb would have made it better. Not that this one is bad, but he's just that good. But,
Right.
Yeah,
this is a fun track.
This song is super fun.
Oh,
is
yeah.
what I'll say, first and foremost. Like, what it reminded me of was things like the cars with machine guns in the first Age of Empire, or Radio Freezer. It evokes kind of the atmosphere-breaking little thing you can do and throw in just to have a little fun
Right.
in the game of that genre at the time.
Yeah, you can summon in this game in particular, if you want to talk about those cheat codes, you can summon a meteor storm of chickens and a flying purple hippopotamus.
A flying
classic stuff.
purple hippo.
Yeah, I think he also leaves a rainbow trail behind him while he flies. Because that's the kind of cheat codes you get in Age of Empires and Age of Mythology games.
Right.
Checks out to me.
Age of Empires 3 has a cheat code where you summon a huge bust of Washington, who just hops on the ground and attacks enemies by just jumping, and his weight just does AoE around him. they're weird at an ensemble.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it's fair to say that the this song in particular kind of gets that vibe as well, that insanity that is hiding beneath the serious looking Age of Empires franchise.
Yeah, exactly. It's like this is a setting, this is a myth, but this is also a game. And sometimes you just have to see it as that.
Mm-hmm.
I expect it. Weird still. Like,
Yeah.
it did catch me on my back foot, for sure.
Oh, yeah. No, this isn't what I was expecting out of this franchise at all. Doesn't even come close.
Again, I've been playing for 2 decades, and it's kind of blindsiding me when I first discovered the song.
Understandably.
But yeah, moving for something completely different. Iron's orchestral cover is really good. I've heard
They're pretty alright. Especially when it comes to things like orchestral covers of a certain Capcom game, in particular Trials and Tribulations. So let me place the scene a little of the context in which you hear that track in-game.
Okay.
Not that version of the track, but it's an official orchestral mix album released soon after the DS version. So, you had your first game that was all pretty much centered around the opposition between Phoenix Wright and Miles Edgeworth, which did an amazing job playing the rival position, and eventually got into trouble, for which you get him off, and then get him off the hook, and then we have the second game, and there's no Edgeworth. He's busy, he's abroad, he's kind of running from the situation, and you get other characters which have their own merits but are not Edgeworth. And then, after the last case's first day, when Franziska von Karma is unfortunately incapacitated, the trail threatens to stop when suddenly, coming from nowhere seemingly, this theme lights up and Edgeworth returns to play as this ambiguous role of textually your opposition, yet morally your partner, in a way that shows that he didn't just twiddle his thumbs off screen. He kind of validated his growth and returned as very much the other side of your medal. And I think that this kind of rivalry of characters that had time to mature and to grow is pretty perfectly represented by this music.
Right.
I wrote down for this song. I just wrote down gaming lawyers also deserve heroic themes. That's basically what this is.
He earns his theme. Honestly, he's the way it kind of has this very slow pace, probably one of the slowest track in this episode we've picked, but it has an unstoppable feel of the two of you working together to reach the truth.
Yeah, I think it's funny that you mentioned this feeling of being unstoppable, because I'm not sure whether it's because both of them are orchestral covers or not, but this one and the Super Metroid orchestral cover that I brought up earlier, they kind of give me that similar vibe of this being the heroic theme for a character that just the villains cannot stop.
Yeah, exactly. And he was returned, and clearly after you've been knocked down in several different ways, now it's your time to show them your hand, after all. And given that the series is named in the original language after something they've translated as a turnabout, it's entirely around those twists that completely change your perspective on the situation.
Right.
I'd say the trumpets accompanying the return of the previous game's rival in a helper role, yet in the opposing camp, is very fitting. It's got this grandiose refinement that Edgeworth shows, yet a determination that commands respect.
That comment about
yes,
plot.
I am very emotional about Edgeworth.
You know, it's funny. It's
That's
like
fair.
you're saying all of these things, and all I can think of is Judgment right now.
I think it's kind of funny your comment about plot twist, because that just reminds me of when they did a live action adaptation of Ace Attorney,
Mm-hmm.
and they made it so in that universe, lawsuits and stuff like that was a spectacle with like straight up 3D monitors and whatnot in the middle of the courtroom.
Yeah, they certainly had choices
Yeah.
in these adaptations.
They kind of took this idea that the franchise is about plot twists and made that into it's about plot twists in the universe as well. They love this crap.
Yeah, and
I
then
can respect that choice.
And then they gave the animation about 3 cents of budget.
Yeah, that's a shame.
That one deserves another kind of horn sound. A certain womp 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 wah 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 wah.
Yeah, that's a muted trombone.
That he did say a horn, not a trumpet.
No, I'm just.
Close enough.
I guess
I'm agreeing.
But I made a concerted choice not to look at Trombone Champ's track.
Yeah, there was that, and then there was what was it? Big Band and Skullgirls? Is that the one I'm thinking of?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
My only knowledge of this character is the awesome remixes people have done using this guy. I've heard a Big Band versus Big Band. We're gonna play all of Battle of the Big Bridge mix before, and I'm just like, this is impressive. I hate it, but it's impressive. No one's actually playing this. It's just MIDI controls. It's just funny.
Yeah, brass can be very particular compared to comparing some instrument to the others. Like the high range of one instrument in a brass section and the low range of the next one can be very close to the untrained ear in particular.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then you have the sax, which is technically a wood, but sounds like a brass because of course.
It's a reed instrument, but yes, it is usually shuffled into the horn section because it's usually made of brass.
Yes.
Except for one specific kind of baritone sax, which looks more like an oboe than it does a saxophone. What one usually think of a saxophone.
Point being that these are certainly difficult instruments to tame, but when they are treated right, they can accompany some very unique heroic moments, some intense epics, and a lot of sci-fi, as it turns out, on the Japanese side of things.
Yeah, it is intrinsically associated with science fiction in Japan, as it turns out, which is awesome. Like, that's a cool usage of this instrument. I think that's actually very neat.
Yeah.
I think it's really apparent in the songs we chose, but also in general, if you stop to listen to trumpets when they come up, it's very apparent that it tends to be used as a showcase of the coming of something amazing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason some religious texts talk about angels playing trumpets. It is very much that sort of impactful sound. And when you don't use it correctly, it can be very painful.
Yeah.
Overwhelming, even. But on that, how about we move on to what we've played recently?
I actually have an entry this week anyway. Yep,
Yay.
Music Arcade, now playing.
You're not beginning, Galen, however,
No.
because I have more brass to start us with.
Go for it.
It's not trumpet, it's sax, but they released recently Advance Wars Reboot Camp, and they did a pretty stellar job with the soundtrack, going above and beyond. Because not only did they remix the entirety of the original game soundtrack, but they also gave each commander a different track for when they activate their power, which is a variation of their main theme, even more intense. In the original, I think it was one theme per country, something like that.
Okay.
And then they also added in menus some tracks from like Super Famicom Wars, just to show that they did their work.
Yeah, so I have a question about this game, because I've been seeing some weirdo stuff on Twitter, but I haven't actually looked up the game. Is this a WayForward game?
Yes.
I thought so. Christina V was the voice director, and I'm like, she's basically like, she's WayForward's golden child at this point in time, and the way this game looks and sounds from what little snippets I've heard just screams WayForward.
Yep, that's because it's them that handled the remakes.
That makes sense.
And while the graphics have been divisive, and there have been some frustration with how online play services are kind of lackluster compared to what happens on the browser-based game scene in particular. If you were to play the campaign and have a good time, it is a very good remake with some very good music, and Sensei's theme in particular from Advance Wars 2 was already one of the best themes in the game. Just this fusion swing theme that was kind of offbeat compared to a lot of the more militaristic tracks or character pieces of other characters, but then they take it, improved it, and then rump it to 11 when it comes to the CO power activation. And yeah, no, it's just some weirdo electro swing goodness that I really love.
I'm just surprised that WayForward got their hands on the Advance Wars franchise. Like that still just kind of is like, they're a great fit for it by the sounds of it, but it sounds like just such a weird confluence of events.
They have worked on a lot of adaptations. I guess they had enough people that were very much loving the original to basically get in talks.
I think the most surprising aspect, in a way, is how they got with Nintendo of all companies, but Ubisoft did that with Mario plus Rabbids.
Yeah, that's
maybe
actually
it's
not
that
that weird. Like, that's weird, but that's not that weird. Nintendo's willing to work with other people. Like, that's not unusual. I mean, they do like indie companies. The indie companies have pushed a lot of business for the Switch.
Practical. Yeah, they do tend to develop a close relationship, and then you walk 10 years down the line and they're essentially a second-party studio.
That has happened.
Hello, Retro Studios.
I was going to say Game Freak, because they're technically independent.
Yeah, exactly. Or Monolith Soft, who is about to release DLC, more of an expansion pack for Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
I thought Monolith Soft was second party. I thought they were actually... Yeah, I thought they were actually bought by Nintendo. Or at least funded by.
Yes.
Okay.
they are second party. I don't know if they always were, but they are
no,
and
when they
have been.
According to
they were-
Wikipedia, it's since 2007. They used to be
Yeah.
a Namco studio.
Yeah, that
Right.
makes sense because that's
And
what
now-
Yeah,
Xenosaga
and the Xeno
was.
franchise.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
and
what Xenosaga
Nintendo
published
now owns 97%. So they are technically not a Nintendo company, but come
Oh,
on, 97%.
don't give me that. That's no,
Yeah.
that's not 90. You own 97% of something. You effectively own that thing. Let's be honest here.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Anyway, new battle with 3 exclamation mark.
Yup.
The
This is a good
DLC
song.
hasn't been out yet, but they have released that song, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, it's a great track.
Yeah, it reminded me immediately of the difference in tone between the battle tracks from the main game and from the expansion in the previous Xenoblade Chronicles, where Torna also wait for a more jazzy, kind of relaxed tone for the battles, as it is more of a retelling. So they could afford to be more cool-headed about it.
Right.
And this one, I don't think it is, but I haven't finished the main game yet. However, it certainly gets down to shenanigans, and I'm glad shenanigans will be accompanied with some very good battle theme, at least.
I mean, if there's one thing Xenoblade is good at, it's good battle themes. That is a pretty
Yeah.
common trait with them.
Yeah, and it's not just one style of battle themes. They have like 3 or 4 different kinds of battle themes, and they're all good.
Good.
I am, however, looking forward for Xenoblade Chronicles 4 to have a song title with 4 exclamation marks.
I want Xenoblade Chronicles X2 first.
I want a Xenoblade Chronicles X on a system I can play.
Yes, also that. That would be fine.
Imagine owning a
I
Nintendo
want
system.
more people to enjoy Xenoblade Chronicles X.
Imagine.
Anyway, speaking of extensions, I've also gotten the expansion packs for Vampire Survivors.
I need to get back into that game. Someone yell at me to get back into that game.
In particular, Tales of the Frostari, which has been released like a week ago, and essentially with the first bit of DLC, they mainly added as its main appeal the idea of the first kind of handcrafted map that wasn't just a repeated pattern over and over. And I was kind of worried that they would do more of the same and that's it for this DLC. They did way better than that, in my opinion. And they go into very interesting direction when it comes to small gameplay variation that help keeping the formula fresh somehow again and again. And then they also gave us some amazing music themes. And then the composer took a kazoo and made kazoo official versions of 3 of those themes.
That really threw me off. Like,
Yeah.
I want to just say this. The video you posted has credits for the Budapest Scoring Orchestra and the composer playing a kazoo.
Yes.
This is
Yeah,
insanity.
I've been playing some Vampire Survivors 2 lately, and you can actually see the track list in game. When you choose a stage, you can choose the background music.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw songs with kazoo at the end of the name, I thought, well, I know what Rena's bringing.
It is very, very Rana.
You know me too well, my friend. Although they have also done, to give you an idea of what I mean by interesting twist and variation, one of the areas you get to has this very oppressing theme with boom, 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 kind of like you would hear as you see a giant monster looming in the distance and walking your way.
Right.
And they integrate that in the gameplay, where the enemies, instead of just moving towards you, move twice as fast, but only on every other beat, which immediately gives that mass of enemies a more pulsating feeling that synchronizes perfectly with the music.
That's neat. I haven't played the newest DLC yet, so I haven't seen that one.
Look forward to it. Next!
Yeah, I've also been on the Vampire Survivors grind, I guess. I'm still finishing the base game. I have a couple things left to unlock.
Yeah.
And then
Gotta
I'm
hit that Queen Sigma.
yeah. And then I'm going to the Moonspell DLC, which let me tell you, as a gothic metal fan, when I first saw the Moonspell DLC announced, that took me for a loop. The name.
Yeah,
'Cause
the
there's
name. I've seen Moonspell a couple times in concert. I'm gonna be honest, not a fan, but like that's what I associate with that name as well, for sure.
Yeah, I think I kind of enjoy one of
you
it.
think you have a weird experience with names in this game. The villain of the Tide of the Force Carry DLC is named Geneviève Gruyère.
Oh boy. Yeah, they were trying. Also, Italian game with Italian names and the enemy's French. Okay.
Honestly, fair.
I mean, it's Europe. Are we that surprised?
I'll just say the French guy said it's okay, so I'm just gonna nod and smile.
I like the villain role. What can I say?
Fair enough. So beyond that, I've also had a bit of a funny timing issue, I suppose, because on the 13th of April, I saw that Against the Storm was on sale, which Brian has talked about on the podcast before, and I went, well,
Yes.
I like city builders. That seems interesting. Let me buy that. It's on sale after all. And
Excellent.
so I've been playing a lot of Mega Man Battle Network instead, because turns out I forgot the release date for the Battle Network Legacy Collection, and it released on the 14th, exactly one day afterward.
Yeah, I can't blame you. We are getting in very dense, interesting release territory, honestly.
Yeah, my bank account is crying right now.
And we're not even close to Tears of the Kingdom yet.
I don't own a Nintendo system, so I'm not falling prey to that one for better or worse.
And I really didn't like. I didn't really like Breath of the Wild, so I'm probably not going to fall prey to that one either.
Oh, I'm falling prey.
I know you are.
I wish you good luck and Godspeed, but
Indeed.
Going back to the things that we have been playing instead of what we will play, I've kind of been, let's say, forced to reevaluate the Mega Man Battle Network soundtracks. Because back in our Mega Man special, we pretty much ended the episode by noting that the GBA titles were kind of meh in the soundtrack department for us. They weren't very memorable compared to the classic.
It wasn't on the level of an X or a Mega Man 2.
Yeah. I do still kind of hold that opinion overall, but man, Sorry, just wait for a bike to pass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of hold that opinion still overall, but man, I had forgotten just how good some of the boss battle themes are.
Good.
Yeah, the one on the playlist for this episode is Surge of Power, which is from Battle Network 6. And it's not like a final boss theme or anything, it's just the generic boss theme for the game. And it goes hard. It is very fun, very energetic. The main complaint I have is that the instrumentation for Battle Network is very limited and kind of uses a lot of bleeps and bloops that blend together once the song starts looping too much.
Yeah, the cyberspace can be a bit samey that way, but this track on its own is it carries that youthful energy of sorts.
Yeah, it kind of embodies the um the cover art for the album, the
Yeah,
Rockman
exactly.
EXE Rockman EXE Sound Collection. I think they call the album. It embodies that picture of Len and Mega Man just rushing, uh, happy but rushing. It is a really cool.
Rushing.
Yeah, I fell right into that one. Uh, but yeah, I've been sort of reevaluating the quality of the Battle Network franchise soundtrack. It's overall better than I remembered, but still not quite on the level of the classic NX franchises.
Yeah.
And since we're talking
That's a
about
high bar.
yeah,
That is a very
since we're
high
talking
bar,
about
admittedly.
since we're talking about the Legacy Collection, I may well just point that it's pretty much straight up ports for modern systems.
Yeah, that's what I
It's
figured.
not remakes. They have a few additions here and there. A couple things have been retranslated, but they didn't fix the awful typos of the earlier games. So this is they also didn't really add many quality of life changes. I think there's just a couple. So this really is if you already for people who already enjoy the games on the GBA. If you didn't like them on the GBA and are thinking that maybe the Legacy Collection will make them more interesting, this is not for you because they are the same games. But I beyond that, I have actually been playing a little bit of Against the Storm. It is pretty fun. Not for everyone because a lot of people who play city builders are there just to see the city expand and get huge and beautiful.
Right.
And I guess the Storm, you don't really have the time for that because it's a roguelike city builder. But I think still it works. It's a weird mix of genres, but it works. And the soundtrack is as idiosyncratic as the description for the game is. I don't think I've ever heard anything like this soundtrack,
Right.
and I like it in the game. Even as the resident neo folk fan, I wouldn't really listen to this in my free time, but in the game, it complements things really well.
It is very damp.
I actually have a different comment. It sounds more icy than wet to me. Like, I feel like I'm in a frozen cave listening to this.
I think the idea of cave is fair because to me, it does the soundtrack in general, especially if you have some decent headphones and a sound card that is at least better than average, you can hear a lot of very deep bass sounds now and then.
Yeah, and on top of that, even the plucked strings can have this crystalline feel to it.
Yeah, and the game kind of does put you in a dark area because you are always in a very small glade in the middle of a huge forest. So there is a sort of that sense of being encroached by darkness in a way.
Right.
So I also kind of get a little bit of the cave vibe from it. I don't really get much forest. I think they were more focused on the threat around you, which is fair. It fits the gameplay. But yeah, it works really well to complement the gameplay. It really puts you in the world of the game, but it's not a soundtrack I've listened to in my free time, even though I love neo-folk. And of course, I've been on Destiny, but I've kind of lowering down my Destiny playtime recently because we're in a bit of a content low right now, as of the time of this recording.
Mega Man.
Yeah, that too. God, Battle Network has some amazing post games. But anyway, that's it for me for this week, for this episode, rather.
I'm actually playing a game that isn't Yakuza. Whee!
Woo!
So I picked up this indie Lovecraftian fishing game called Dredge.
As one does.
Honestly, that sounds way weirder than I put it. The Lovecraftian aspects are actually kind of the weakest aspects of it. It's got a great art style, but this is not really a scary game. It's a very chill game. Um,
Gotta love some fishing games instead of just fishing mini games.
yes. And actually, this one is quite good and quite fun, and it's got a great soundtrack. And like usual, shout out to the developers for putting that whole soundtrack on onto YouTube. It just sounds great. It's got some really good viola stuff going on. It makes me happy. This is a cool game. It's worth playing if you're into it. Just don't expect something like really creepy. It's about as scary as Control is, like when it comes to like the unknown.
From what I've heard, that sounds like a good comparison.
Yeah, the soundtrack kind of feels like they get the Lovecraftian vibe, but it's sort of a chill Lovecraftian.
Yeah.
And from what I've seen of the gameplay, that fits the gameplay as well.
Yeah.
It's not really...
I found exactly one jump scare, and that's because I was being almost quasi-intentionally reckless.
Yeah, from what I've seen, admittedly, everything I've seen has been from your streams. But
okay then.
It does feel like a fishing game that it has the Lovecraftian inspiration on its sleeves, but it's not like you're trying to fish Cthulhu.
Yes, correct.
Just the fishes you find are a bit weird looking, and some of them may or may not have the color out of space coming from their eyes.
Pretty much. So also, I'm still playing Arknights like usual. Near Light is doing a rerun right now, and I like the Casimir's tournament music. Like, it's always very energetic, very sports themed, very fun.
It's party time.
It is, despite being one of the most like politically complex storylines in the game right now. Like, this one's all politics, which is kind of hilarious given that it's the tournament arc. I think, Rana, you actually popped into a stream while I was doing this. You're like, I like this whole, like, Cold War going on in the backdrop of a tournament thing. I'm just like, yeah, that's kind of the selling point of the whole event.
Honestly, talking about Arknights reminds me, I don't think in the last episode we brought it up, but they had an April Fool's event where the soundtrack went hard.
Oh, yeah. I didn't bring that up. Why didn't I bring that up? Yeah, no, so they had...
Because we were making an April Fool episode.
That's true. So yeah, in the April Fool's event of Arknights, last year's April Fool's was that terrible Emperor rap, which ended up in the concert that we did a special on. I hope this song for this April Fool's gets into the concert, because this guitar does not mess around.
Yeah, that was surprising. I remember we were joking about it on Discord when you went on stream to play it. And I was like, okay, I get that the soundtrack to this game is good. But let's check this out. Oh man, he wasn't kidding.
Yeah, no. If I'm going out of my way to talk about the soundtrack for a game that is a soundtrack that stacked, it's got to be either something horrific or something special. It was definitely the second one this time around.
Yeah, that checks out.
Yeah, I was close to headbanging. If I weren't using earbuds, I probably would have been.
Yeah, deeply understandable. I was jamming out pretty hard as well. It was also an incredibly unique event because you actually had direct control over your character. It turned it very briefly into a shooter. More of a side-scrolling, they call it bullet hell. It wasn't a bullet hell. It was just side-scrolling shoot 'em up.
Thank you for being one of the few for whom the difference still matters. Damn it.
I was waiting for that response.
You're welcome? Hey, I care about genres. I'm not going to say one genre is better than any other genre, but I do care about genres.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
why we're friends.
I mean, as the only person on Earth who still differentiates roguelike from roguelite, I get you.
I do it too.
Same. I try to. I do get them mixed up, but that's, a mistake, not intentionally just ignoring the difference.
Okay, here's the thing. Kind of getting games stuck in genres is bad.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean the notion of a genre as an analytic tool is bad. And if you're going to use that tool, use it right. Thank you. Moving on.
Moving on. On the subject of doing things right. Okay. So there's a little background here. I'm not actually playing this game in question, but I did get a soundtrack recently. So, as we all know, we're doing
Pretty
this...
soon you will.
Pretty soon I will. It's 3 months out now, I think?
3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we already played Ishin.
Indeed.
So we've been doing this thing, Year of the Dragon, where we play one Yakuza game per month. This has taken up a lot of my time because I play these games very thoroughly.
Yes, you do.
I do. But that's, for me, part of the experience.
I honestly don't know how you're going to survive like a dragon.
We will find out. I am terrified of that game.
I have 100 hours, and I'm much less thorough than you.
Yeah, that's what scares me.
I think it's fair to say that even as someone who has gone 100% on multiple Assassin's Creed games, when I met Galen, I realized I wasn't a completionist.
Yeah, pretty much. I like experiencing a game. I like experiencing as much of it as the developers will let me, assuming it's not too overly frustrating or jank. I will absolutely abandon ship if something actually is bad.
Ring that towel.
I'm sorry?
Ring that towel full of scraps of game juice.
Pretty much, yeah. I want to see what the developers laid out for me. Anyway, that itself is just sort of the setup. I found myself talking to someone off stream about my favorite boss themes of all time. And of course I got like the Bipolar Nightmare in there. I got Legendary Belmont from Curse of Darkness. You know, I got a couple of themes there. And then I had to think, I'm like, is there one from Dynasty Warriors? Think. No, not really. I don't really like Lubu's theme that much. Tadakatsu's is good, but I wouldn't call it a favorite of all time. Orochi's is pretty hot, but like, you know, I'm thinking, okay, well, what's a good action game? Devil May Cry? Not really doesn't really stick in my head. And then all of a sudden I realize Pledge of Demons playing in my head right now, and I'm like, yeah, that adds up. I mentioned that I wasn't very happy with Ishin's soundtrack. In retrospect, that's not actually the case. It's a very good soundtrack. The problem is the best song on it is a crossover track, the aforementioned Pledge of Demon, which kind of, once I take that song out of it, I kind of had to reappraise Ishin's soundtrack on its own merits. It turns out it's actually very good, but it's just overshadowed. So I realized that song's on there, and I should probably track down Yakuza 0 soundtrack and finally have it on my playlist so I can listen to this and other songs from that soundtrack whenever the heck I want. So last night I did that, and it occurred to me, wait a minute, they screwed up Yakuza Kiwami 2 soundtrack release very hard. I've talked about this.
That they did.
Yeah, this was a terrible soundtrack release that I outright told the audience not to actually support. I cannot...
Incomprehensible, really.
Oh, yeah, no, it was awful. I didn't understand what the hell they were doing and what their publishing arm was thinking. They did not do this on Yakuza 0's soundtrack. They did the opposite. If anything, we're kind of spoiled. They gave us every variation of every song. The only song that is not on there is Bakamitai. And I have a feeling that's just a licensing thing going on, because all of the other karaoke and all of the dancer tracks are.
Sick.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, so they have 2 full discs of 40 songs apiece with everything on there. So yeah, as opposed to Yakuza 2's, I have to honestly say that yes, Yakuza 0 soundtrack is worth purchasing and supporting. They did it right this time, which just makes Yakuza Kiwami 2's baffling release even more confusing. Because they already did it right. How did they backslide that badly?
Especially since after that, I don't really have much to complain about for the way they released the Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon soundtrack.
Right. So I'm
pretty thorough.
I'm even more confused as to what went wrong with Yakuza Kiwami 2 now.
Though.
Like, that's just so baffling to me.
Weird.
Yeah. It's just such a crappy soundtrack release for no discernible reason. I don't get it. Anyway, that's me.
Well, on that note, I think we can doot our way to the doot that doot.
And translating into English, thank you guys so much for tuning in to this newest trumpet-centric, doot-centric episode. of Music Arcade. As always, you can find us in the links in the description below. Please reach out and give us feedback. We love to hear from people, and we're not getting that feedback. Please give us feedback. We love that feedback. Just don't try to feedback my internet. For those of you watching the live stream, it is a disaster area right now, and I'm not sure why.
I think Rana has officially turned into a big band.
Yeah, I think that is where we're going to go ahead and wrap. Thank you guys so much. We will see you all next episode. Have a good one, y'all.
See you next time.